Welcome back, coin collectors. If you're fascinated by rare coins, especially UK's iconic 1 penny pieces, then today's video is just for you. We're diving into the top 5 ultra-rare UK large 1 penny coins, exploring their value, history, and what makes them so sought after by collectors worldwide. If you're ready, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. 1946 UK 1 penny. The 1946 1 penny was minted during the reign of King George VI, who ruled the United Kingdom from 1936 to 1952. This period came after a turbulent time in British history, with World War II having ended just a year before. The war had a significant impact on the British economy, and coins like this one were a reflection of Britain's resilience and recovery in the post-war era. Let's take a closer look at the coin itself. On the obverse or front side, you'll find the portrait of King George VI. This design was created by Thomas Humphrey Paget, a renowned British sculptor. The inscription around the edge reads Georgievs Vidgbr Amen. FD End, which stands for George VI, by the grace of God, King of all the Britons, Defender of the Faith, Emperor of India. It's a reflection of Britain's empire during that time. King George VI. Designer Thomas Humphrey Paget. Inscription translation George VI, by the grace of God, King of all the Britons, Defender of the Faith, Emperor of India. On the reverse side, we have the classic image of Britannia, seated and holding a trident in her right hand with a shield at her side. This design had been a staple of the British penny for decades, symbolizing the strength and protection of the British Empire. The inscription 1 penny is featured prominently, with the year 1946 displayed below Britannia. This penny was struck from bronze, which was composed of 95% copper, 4% tin, and 1% zinc. This material had been in use for pennies since 1860, but after 1946, due to copper shortages, the composition of pennies would begin to change in later years. Composition 95% copper, 4% tin, 1% zinc. In 1946, a total of 67,103,600 pennies were minted. While this isn't an exceptionally low mintage, it's still of interest to collectors due to its historical context. 1946 minted 67,103,600. Now let's talk about the value of the 1946 penny today. The value of this coin depends on its condition, also known as its grade. For example, a circulated 1946 penny in average condition is typically worth between 10 and 50 pence. However, if you have a coin in uncirculated or mint condition, its value could be significantly higher, ranging from PS1 to PS10 or more, depending on the demand and condition. Factors like scratches, wear, and toning can affect the coin's value, so always make sure to have your coin graded by a professional if you think you have a rare or well-preserved example. While the 1946 penny isn't considered rare, it's still a desirable piece for collectors of British coinage due to its historical context and its place within the broader collection of George VI coins. Complete collections of pennies from the George VI era, which span from 1937 to 1952, are popular among numismatists. So there you have it, the 1946 UK 1 penny, a coin that reflects Britain's post-war recovery, with a design steeped in history. Whether you're a seasoned collector or just starting out, this penny is an affordable and fascinating piece of British history to add to your collection. 1961 UK 1 penny. The 1961 UK 1 penny is a relic from a time when the British currency system was still based on the pre-decimal system. Back then, 12 pennies made a shilling, and 20 shillings made a pound. This was part of a system that had been in place for centuries, until decimalization in 1971. The coin itself features the image of Queen Elizabeth II on the obverse, as it was minted during her reign. At the time, Britain was modernizing but still very much connected to its imperial past. The reverse of the coin displays the iconic seated figure of Britannia, holding a trident and shield, a symbol of Britain's maritime strength and unity. Let's take a closer look at the design and specifications of the 1961 penny. This coin was struck in bronze with a weight of 9.4 grams and a diameter of 30.81 millimeters, making it relatively large by today's coin standards. The bronze composition gives it that rich, deep color we associate with classic pennies. On the obverse, you'll see the profile of Queen Elizabeth II, with the inscription Elizabeth II Di Gratia Regina FD. This Latin phrase translates to Elizabeth II, by the grace of God, Queen, Defender of the Faith. Now, on the reverse side, we have Britannia, the personification of Britain, seated and facing right, holding a trident and shield. The inscription reads 1 penny, and the date, 1961, is located just below Britannia. So how much is a 1961 UK 1 penny worth today? Well, the value can vary depending on the condition. Pennies from this era were produced in large quantities, so they're not particularly rare. In circulated condition, these coins typically sell for around $0.10 to $1 USD. But if you have a well-preserved, uncirculated, or proof version of the coin, the value can jump to anywhere between $5 and $15. And of course, the better the condition, the more desirable it is to collectors. Here's an interesting fact: over 114 million 1961 pennies were minted, which means they're relatively easy to find. However, finding one in pristine condition or with unique errors like misstrikes can make the coin much more valuable. Coins with minting errors or that are in exceptional condition are what serious collectors are looking for. So if you come across one of these coins in your collection, inspect it carefully. So while the 1961 UK 1 penny may not make you rich, it's a beautiful piece of British history. It's a great coin to add to any collection, especially if you're a fan of pre-decimal British currency. Whether you have one of these coins lying around or you're just curious about its history, we hope this video gave you all the information you need. 1963 UK 1 penny. Although the coin was minted in 1963, it features the image of King George VI. Now, some of you might be wondering, why does a coin minted after George VI's death in 1952 still have his image? That's because this was one of the last years of production for coins bearing his portrait, as the UK's Royal Mint was transitioning to new designs for Queen Elizabeth II. George VI, father of Queen Elizabeth II, reigned from 1936 until his death in 1952. During his reign, the UK experienced the hardships of World War II, and the country saw many changes post-war. This 1963 penny is one of the last coins that carried his legacy, symbolizing a transitional period in British history. Let's take a closer look at the design of the 1963 1 penny. On the obverse, we have a left-facing portrait of George VI. He's shown without a crown, symbolizing a more down-to-earth and relatable image of a monarch who led his country through tough times. Around the portrait, you'll see the Latin inscription Georgives, VIDGBR Om. This translates to George VI, by the grace of God, King of all the Britons, defender of the faith. Flipping it over to the reverse, we see the iconic seated figure of Britannia. She's holding a trident in her right hand and a shield with the Union Jack on her left. The date 1963 appears on the reverse as well, and beneath Britannia is the inscription 1 penny. This design had been used on UK pennies since 1797, making it a very familiar image to collectors. Now, here's a cool historical tidbit. Although this coin was minted in 1963, a few years later, the Royal Mint switched entirely to Queen Elizabeth II coins. This 1963 penny was part of the tail end of a long-running series before the country shifted to coins featuring the young Queen. This period in British numismatics is particularly interesting because it was also the beginning of the end for pre-decimal currency. In 1971, the UK transitioned to a decimal system, so this 1 penny represents one of the last of the old-style coins. What is this coin worth today? So what's the value of the 1963 George VI penny today? Well, its value really depends on its condition, or what collectors call grade. A well-circulated coin with visible wear might fetch anywhere between 20 to 50 pence. However, if you have an uncirculated coin, meaning it's in mint condition or very close to it, the value can rise significantly. Collectors will pay anywhere from PS5 to PS10 for a coin in great condition, especially if it has sharp details and no signs of wear. And if you have a particularly rare mint error version, the value could be higher. Keep in mind, this coin is not particularly rare, as millions were produced in 1963. However, because it's a coin from the final years of George VI and before decimalization, it still holds historical value, especially for enthusiasts of British coinage. That wraps up today's video on the 1963 UK 1 penny featuring King George VI. It's a fascinating coin that bridges two important eras in British history, and while it's not the most valuable coin in circulation today, its historical significance makes it a gem in any collection. 1928 UK 1 penny. The 1928 1 penny is part of a long tradition of British pennies. This particular coin was struck during the reign of King George V, who ruled from 1910 to 1936. But why is 1928 significant? While it might seem like an ordinary year, coins from the late 1920s and early 1930s were minted in lower quantities compared to earlier periods, making them rarer today. George V's reign was a time of change for the UK, coming off the back of World War I and moving into the interwar period. The penny remained an essential part of daily transactions and was made from bronze, a metal that gave the coin its distinctive reddish-brown color. These pennies circulated widely, and many people remember using them even decades later. Let's start with the design. On the obverse side of the 1928 penny, we have the portrait of King George V, designed by Bertram McKennell. The inscription reads, Georgives V Dei Grey Brit Amen Rex Fidefi, an imp, which stands for George V, by the grace of God, King of all Britons, defender of the faith, Emperor of India. Quite a mouthful, but typical for British coins of the time. This Latin inscription highlights the status of the British Empire at the time. Stretching across the globe, it reflects both the monarch's religious and imperial authority. Now on the reverse, we see the famous image of Britannia, seated with a trident and shield, symbolizing Britain's naval dominance and protection. This reverse design had been in use since the late 1600s, but this era would be one of the last times Britannia would appear in this form on a penny. These coins were struck at the Royal Mint, located in London. 1928 wasn't a particularly high production year for pennies, with around 27 million coins minted. While that might sound like a lot, it's relatively low compared to earlier years when over 100 million were produced annually. The lower mintage numbers make the 1928 penny more desirable to collectors today. However, most of the coins that remain were heavily circulated, so finding one in pristine condition can be a real challenge. When collecting coins, error coins and variants always attract extra attention. While the 1928 penny doesn't have widely known rare variants, always keep an eye out for striking errors such as off-center strikes or doubling on the lettering. These can add significant value to a seemingly common coin. So what's this coin worth today? Like most coins, the value of a 1928 George V penny depends on its condition. Coins graded as good or fine, which has seen a lot of circulation, can sell for around $1 to $5. But if you happen to have a 1928 penny in very fine or extremely fine condition, you could be looking at values between $20 and $50 now. If you're lucky enough to own one in uncirculated or mint state condition, the value can jump to over $100. 1939 UK 1 penny. The 1939 1 penny coin is part of British pre-decimal currency. This particular coin was minted during a time of significant global upheaval right at the start of World War II. King George VI had been on the throne for only 3 years after the abdication of his brother, King Edward VIII, in 1936. The 1930s were a period of tension, and this coin is a tangible link to that important era. Let's take a closer look at the man on the obverse of the coin, King George VI. Known for his leadership during World War II, George VI played a critical role in maintaining British morale during some of the darkest days of the conflict. Now let's examine the coin itself. On the obverse, we see a left-facing portrait of King George VI, designed by Humphrey Paget. Around the edge, the inscription reads, Georgives Vidgbr Omen, which is a Latin abbreviation meaning George VI, by the grace of God, King of all the Britons, Defender of the Faith, Emperor of India. On the reverse, we have the classic depiction of Britannia, the personification of Britain. She's seated with her trident in one hand, a shield with the Union Jack in the other, and a ship sailing in the background. This reverse design remained relatively unchanged from 1860 until 1970, making it one of the most recognizable symbols of British coinage. Here's an interesting fact: the 1939 penny isn't particularly rare. Over 120 million of these coins were minted at the Royal Mint. However, what makes some 1939 pennies valuable is their condition, as well as a few unique features that we'll get into shortly. Mintage over 120 million. So, how much is the 1939 penny worth today? Well, that depends on its condition, also known as the grade. Here's a breakdown of approximate values. If your coin is heavily worn and in circulated condition, it's typically worth less than $2. However, if you've got one that's uncirculated or improved condition where the details are crisp and untouched by time, the value can rise to over $100. When grading your 1939 penny, there are a few key features you'll want to inspect. First, check the portrait of King George VI. Is it sharp and detailed, or is it worn down? Next, look at the reverse Britannia's trident, and the ship's sails should be clearly defined. King's portrait details. Britannia's trident, clarity of ship's sails. Another important aspect is the luster. If your coin has that original shiny finish, it can significantly increase its value. Even small imperfections can affect the price, so use a magnifying glass to carefully examine your coin. So where can you sell your 1939 1 penny? There are plenty of online marketplaces like eBay where these coins are frequently traded. You can also approach local coin dealers or attend coin fairs to find collectors who might be interested.